Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show on News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM. KFYO. Much to get into during this hour of the program. We've got a guest in studio, the sheriff for Lubbock County. Everyone's acting right up here, so he's in studio.
I can always tell when somebody's ducking me, they'll dive into an office right quick or something.
Yeah, exactly.
They might need a little warrants check or something. But no, everybody looked like they were up to all the right things.
Yeah,
today.
that's good. That's good. We're trying to warn everybody the day before, like, hey, sheriff's going to be here. Y'all need to get everything in order, okay? Sheriff Kelly Rowe in studio today. Sheriff, it's been a while since we've had you on. How are things going?
Man, they're rocking right along, showing no signs of slowing down, which is a good thing. That means it means our community is growing. But with that, when it comes to my part of that puzzle, it means our guys are staying really busy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about crime in general. How are things looking in Lubbock County? Lately we've seen a couple of stories in the city where the feds are getting involved, creating, what's called a safe neighborhood. Mm-hmm. When I saw that story, I immediately thought there's got to be part of this that deals with drugs, that deals with what we're seeing from the border coming up into Lubbock.
Absolutely.
It all ties together, doesn't it?
Absolutely, it does. And I always tell people, one of the simplest statistics I can ever put out there is we've got a jail, 1,218 in there today, I believe. 70% of them are in there because they're addicted to something. So that just always tells you, and like I said, they're not charged typically with the actual possession. They're in for the burglary, robbery, theft, ID fraud, whatever they use to sustain the habit. And so to your core question, that's the biggie that still we're up against every day is the amount of narcotics being trafficked in. And then everything that comes with that on the periphery, the gangs to distribute it, the violence that comes from the gangs, so on and so forth.
Y'all just recently partnered up and did a gang enforcement evening. How did that go?
Yeah, those things work out so well, and that those operations actually started well before we had the anti-gang center up and going. They've just now become much more regular, or I guess for the audience, irregular.
Right.
But nonetheless, it's a tremendous opportunity to really maximize a lot of personnel and get out there and deal with the street crime suppression to address a lot of these things with gang members, get them identified, see who they're running with, get them into the system so we can better track their activities when they're out, up to no good.
Are people in Lubbock still surprised about gang activity in this area?
I still hear it occasionally. I think what still kind of holds a surprise, unfortunately, is not so much the gang activity, but just the narcotics, trade in general. Is that's something we're seeing all over the entire city. That's not isolated, to particular segments of the city or the county. It's just not uncommon to be in some of the nicer neighborhoods, and still coming across, a major operator or dealer.
Yeah, and so. How does that impact what you and your deputies are doing on a day in, day out basis?
Well, again, being able to put together this group of all these multiple agencies, so us and the police department and Department of Public Safety and even some of the federal offices that have agents here assigned locally, that really gives us a big force multiplier to get out there and deal with this stuff much more aggressively. But most importantly, the two big things we gain out of that is all the shared intelligence that we didn't have when we were kind of siloed out doing our own things. And the other thing is instant deconfliction. We don't have to worry about stepping on each other's toes, getting into a blue-on-blue situation, an officer get hurt or something because Agency A is over here working a buy-bust operation. Agency B thinks they're doing, a buy-a-walk, and you end up with officers on officers there. Yeah. So, again, the fruits of what we're seeing out of that are just really amazing. And like I said, I'm quite proud to say when I look at those stat sheets, since particularly with our HIDA, our high-intensity drug trafficking area being tied to the Metroplex area, saying there's only one of their units is doing as well as our unit is here in terms of numbers, and that's a real testament to the guys and gals that are out there doing the job every day, that we're matching up, deal for deal, arrest for arrest, seizure for seizure of an area as big as the Metroplex.
When one of the times that we've had you on, and this goes back a couple of years, you had been given some presentations to, groups and also elected officials here in this area and maybe even throughout the state about the what's happening on the border having a direct influence on Lubbock. Has anything gotten any better?
No, absolutely not. If anything, you certainly say it's gotten worse, and certainly it's just that much more prolific. The numbers typically have only gone up. We might see an anomaly in there one particular quarter or something, but then again, you can write that off to a number of different reasons. Maybe you had X amount of your staff out on training or doing whatever. But since 2014, when it just really blew up, and that's the time you're talking about, because it was the summer of 2015, I was out giving those presentations, because narcotics just wasn't something I talked publicly about a lot, just given kind of the nature of how those operations function, and for security and that type of thing. But we just couldn't ignore it. It had blown up, 800% increase alone in crystal meth and seizures, just in that from 2013 to 2014.
Wow.
And so, we were really trying to get caught up, and that's where you really started those partnerships, or saw those partnerships start to form. It was like, we've got to come together, because this is something that's going to eat alive. And while we're competing for resources in so many ways, these guys are all working together anyway. Let's get them out there and let them put their full focus on it.
With the border the way it is right now, and we've seen, obviously, if anyone's been paying attention to the news, they've heard the headlines where more and more people are
Right.
getting into the United States. That means more drugs are coming into the U.S. Is meth still the big problem here?
It still is here, but again, you can see it other places around the state, particularly around the nation, where heroin is still alive and well. Cocaine is still coming in lots of amounts. Legalization hasn't slowed anything down. We still have as much coming up from the South as we do, coming in from, the Colorado and Californias of the world that are growing the high-grade stuff. So that hasn't slowed down, and I guess, as far as just the border question, I mean, and what we're still seeing as a result of that. Unfortunately, I just went to a briefing. I was with every one of the Border Patrol sector chiefs from Brownsville to San Diego just last month, and they paint a bleak picture. And part of it is because their agents are so tied up handling these caravan, these big groups, that, enforcement looking for traffickers and those types of things, unfortunately takes a back seat when you're changing diapers. And this is their words. Changing diapers and tending to medical considerations and doing all the things they have to do before they end up releasing them, typically, back into the interior.
Yeah. If you could sit down with the president, and maybe it's not even the president, if you could sit down with the other leaders who are in D.C., what would you tell them to do? Well,
I just don't understand how you don't see the problem. The information is out there. Their own federal agencies are reporting this stuff up through. I look at one example. If there was anywhere else in the world, we had mass murders, which the latest count is up in excess of 300,000. Folks, just involving cartel violence, mass graves being found 2 to 3 a week down there. And this stuff is all being reported up, and yet it just all of a sudden stops. And so when I'm like you and I'm yelling at my TV, at Fox News or whatever else, the question is, how do you ignore that? How is it you're not getting the message that this is trouble, and it's everything that's happening down there is coming right over to us, and we're trying to do everything we can to deal with it. And quite frankly, we don't have the capacity to do it. Local law enforcement, state law enforcement, they just don't have the capacity. We're holding a line is about the best.
How active are the cartels in Lubbock?
Very active. Everything migrates back towards that. I can maybe remind you back to a news story that was done about that. And the street gangs, they're all, that's where their products are coming from. And so where there used to be a lot of independence and those types of things, everything filters back up, towards those particular cartels. And so they're alive and well. We catch members all the time. Significant number of typically for us here in Lubbock, it's Mexican nationals, but we still see the Hondurans, Guatemalans, El Salvador, the Central American folks occasionally.
We see any MS-13?
Yes, we've seen a few, but fortunately, knock on wood, hasn't been a real significant number of them here. I think they're getting filtered, it seems like, to the bigger cities.
It seems like in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, they're unfortunately having to deal with a little bit more of that.
Right. And if you, of course, as soon as you get up towards the East Coast, in New York City and Boston, those areas. But we still have, last count, I think we were teetering somewhere around 1,800, documented gang members, operating right here in Lubbock County. So we still have more than we can say grace over as it is.
Yeah, absolutely. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Lubbock County Sheriff Kelly Rowe here on the Chad Hasty Show, KFYO. We're back on the Chad Hasty Show. Sheriff Kelly Rowe in studio. And Sheriff, let's, for a little bit, let's move away from the illegal immigration part and this deals with crime. Last year, I think it was about this time, y'all are still dealing with budget. Now you're dealing with budget. There was a story that came out last year that the commissioner's court, the old commissioner's court, were wanting to cut some things from y'all's budget. How are we looking this year going into a new budget cycle?
Well, we just got everything submitted. So that process, works its way throughout the summer. We've had an opportunity to do some preliminary briefings with particularly the new court members. Just looking ahead, talking about, kind of where we've been, what we've been trying to accomplish, and how we're moving forward. So, the earliest, like I said, indications are we're gonna wait and see how that process goes. Unfortunately, the former court, did a lot of things that I'm sure, there's going to have to be corrections and fixes and some other things that are going to have to happen. So we're just going to have to kind of work through it and make sure we get back on a path of where we need to be.
Yeah. Yesterday, the city of Lubbock and LISD, they did this joint active shooter drill. And it reminded me of this out in Broward County where you had the mass shooting at the high school there. You had the sheriff's deputy who has been charged now with not going to the aid of those kids who were in that school building. And the debate since he's been charged has been what is an officer supposed to do? Is an officer supposed to go in, or is an officer supposed to wait? I don't know if with the Broward County, if they have their own guidelines, but
right.
What do you tell your guy?
It's the typical thing. This is what we're in the business to do, and and of course, I don't tend to speak on other incidents, other places. That's not something I'll typically do. But the simple fact of the matter is we're there to protect life. And, when you're in an active shooter situation, whether it's in a school, whether it's in a public building, whatever the case might be, our primary goal and mission is to end the violence. That you stop that first, right, and then you go from there. So, every area is unique and different. But even in a place like our size, you take an incident that took place out at Friendship. Still takes time to mobilize, folks up, and we're fairly well equipped. But again, there's going to be that time that you've got to build up before you have assets like SWAT fully available, and ready to respond. So, it's always the case. Initial responding officers are going to get in. If you hear gunfire, you're typically going to respond and go.
You don't want to wait for backup. You
right.
want to go.
If the situation is stable, if you don't have violence occurring directly,
sure,
then yes, that's kind of the standard interview rookie question. What are you going to do in this situation? Well, I'm going to call for backup, and all this. But when something's actively moving, you're moving to it to get to end it.
Yeah, visiting with Sheriff Kelly Rowe here on the Chad Hasty Show. Chief Greg Stevens, obviously no longer here. How was that relationship between you and Chief Stevens, and what would you like to see? I guess moving forward with that role.
Well, of course, that's up to the city council and city manager to certainly decide on how they want to proceed. The relationship between Greg and I was outstanding, and I think we got a lot of great things accomplished that are still continuing today. Some of which we were talking about earlier in the show. So again. I will tell you when I noticed those things when the news press releases were going out about that, and I drove back into Signal and caught them. I kind of, you get take a little breather there because again, the relationship was so good. I made a comment about him that we've been friends so long, neither one of us remembers who the bad influence was, but, I'm proud he's getting to head down to Rockport. I've teased him a few times to find out whether he's actually got his red swim trunks or not. And, if he's got more four-wheelers than he does patrol cars. But I think he and his wife are going to be thrilled about it down there. That's a great spot. But, again, like I said, the partnerships that are occurring in here, the only guidance I could give is I would certainly be hoping we get a new chief in that's willing to continue those cooperative
Yeah, and
efforts.
that's what I meant. Because I mean, it seems like all the law enforcement out here, and maybe this is me going through that Citizens Academy and seeing how well you guys were working together in that. It seems like the law enforcement agencies out here, y'all gel pretty well, whether it's DPS, Sheriff's Department, City of Lubbock Police. The thing that, I think that everyone has to wonder is if you get a chief in who's, sometimes old law enforcement, they like to separate and be, hey, we don't like to share information. That was the
siloing is still not an uncommon problem.
Right, exactly. But you'd like to see that kind of those partnerships continue.
Oh, absolutely. We've got too many good things. We've got too many successes we can show as a result of those partnerships out there. Citizens Academy is one great example. But you've got the Metro Special Crimes Unit that's out there. They've had really great success, not only solving current, major cases, homicides. They've even cleared now, several older, what we sadly call the cold case, some of the cold case files. Obviously, everything going on with the HIDA and the tag, and I think there's just more on the horizon.
Yeah, absolutely. Had a question that was sent in, and it goes back to the border issue. Illegal immigration here in Lubbock. Do y'all see a lot of illegal immigrants who are brought into the jail?
Absolutely, rather significant numbers. In fact, fortunately, we've signed into a program called the 287G program, which allows me to take some jail staff and actually get them credentialed and licensed to handle it with immigration authority, so they have access to all the systems and everything else. So when these individuals are coming to jail, for whatever number of reasons, through an interview or through just some situational variable, these guys decide to take a closer look at them and find that they're prior deport, they don't have, their status is expired, visas, green cards, whatever. Then they can apply the appropriate holds and detainers, and we can prep to transfer them. But what's really amazed me about that is the number of countries we've seen, and some of those countries are: China, Kazakhstan, a multitude of different African countries. Central Europe, Canada was one popped up. Obviously the predominance is going to be Latin, is going to be either Mexico or Central America. But like I said, the numbers have been significant. We certainly don't have a shortage of those individuals we're catching. And then we also, I always pay particularly close attention to what are they coming in charged with. And of course, it's intoxication-related charges, narcotics, drug trafficking, and the other one that's really disconcerting to me is a lot of indecency with children, and those types of sexual assault of children, those types of charges. So,
and so if you have someone who is in the country illegally, they're booked into the jail. What's the process? Like how fast sometimes does ICE respond to you guys? Always remember this: an individual that does not have legal status in this country, but they are, they're arrested and charged, with either a state charge against the state of Texas or even a federal charge. They're going to answer to that charge first. That's going to be completely disposed of, including whether or not they end up with a prison sentence or whatever the case might be. If it's something where they are actually going to be released from us, at the detention center out there, then they have them picked up within typically 24 to 48 hours, and that's that area we like them to be in for those. But the vast majority of those guys end up coming in on such serious charges, they're going to go off to prison, and so those detainers are going to go with them. And then once it comes time for them to be up for release from the prison system, then ICE will pick them up then and deal with them. Space still doing okay out at the jail?
Yes, it is. We've got so many programs and things going on out there that number's been holding pretty steady. Of course, summertime has hit. Notice the numbers are coming up a little bit, but it is summertime, so that's not particularly abnormal at this point. But no, they're still holding really well.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's good.
I don't mind that problem at all.
Yeah, that's still a great facility out there. Sheriff, you're doing a great job. We appreciate you, as always, coming on the show.
My pleasure. I always enjoy it.
Letting people know what's going on out there. I think it's eye-opening.
Yeah, you can call on me anytime. I always enjoy getting to do these.
All right. Sheriff Kelly Rowe, appreciate your time.